All right, June 17th, 2000. Sugar Shane Mosley, Oscar De La Hoya, WBC welterweight title fight. Huge matchup in that time frame. And a first for you, Dan Rafael, a first ever trip in a working capacity, in any capacity, right, to Southern California to cover this big time fight.
First ever to California, Southern, Northern, Central, you name it. This was a huge fight. I love this fight. 25 years later, it remains one of my all-time favorite fights, both that I've watched as well as that I've been ringside for. I have so many tremendous memories from that whole experience. But just to start off, you had the background. One of the things that made it so big, and it was so perfect that they put this fight in Los Angeles, which up to that point for several years before that had a lot of boxing activity, but hadn't had a mega fight in a long time. For me, I had just started working at USA Today in March of 2000. I'd covered some other fights, but June of 2000, a few months later, I always consider this my first mega fight that I was ringside for. I'd covered Lennox Lewis in a heavyweight championship fight. I had covered some other bouts, other events, but to me, this was the first real big one. They called it Destiny. That's because Oscar and Shane, who were both revered amateurs from the Los Angeles area, had grown up in that amateur program. Oscar had fought and won the gold medal in the 1992 Olympics. Shane was on course to be in that same Olympic Games, but in a different weight class. He had been upset by Vernon Forrest in the Olympic trials. That was that became the storyline of their rivalry in the professional ranks, where Vernon defeated Shane Mosley 2 times. But when Shane didn't make the Olympic team, he's a good enough guy that he went and he helped Oscar prepare. They sparred together, and he really gave him good work getting ready for what became his gold medal run. And so it was always sort of assumed that at some point, as a professionals, these guys would square off. Shane had become a lightweight champion, had dominated, had knocked out all of his opponents in all of his defenses, like 8 defenses, all by knockout. Jumped up to the welterweight division by skipping over 140. Took 2 fights against reputable opposition, and then they set up the fight with Oscar De La Hoya. Now, Oscar, he was 2 fights removed from the controversial loss to Tito Trinidad, so he was not undefeated when they fought. He had come back from the Tito fight. He had defeated Daryl Coley in a knockout, and then became the Sugar Shane Mosley fight, and that was a big deal, big HBO pay-per-view card. One of the reasons why it's such a big deal for me, besides just being my first ever time going to LA, California in general, having a big fight, first mega fight in my book. First time I ever met Oscar and Shane, whose careers I would cover in detail for many, many years afterwards. But I also, first time I ever met in person, Bob Arum and many of the people on his staff who I still deal with today. People like, for example, Bruce Champler, Todd DeBuff, the whole crew. Still have this memory of meeting Bob in the press room at the what was then the Staples Center, the Chick Hearn press room, and being introduced to Bob and Oscar. And Bob knew I was now the new guy at USA Today. They had hired me as a full-time boxing writer, which I hadn't had for a little while. And he gave me a big hug, and he looked at me and he says, "The man who saved boxing at USA Today." I'll never forget that as long as I live. So,
and
then,
who knew that he would be coming after you with plastic silverware in short order at a later date? But it happens that way sometimes, back and forth.
I remember a bunch of they had the rumors that there was video of Oscar and Shane sparring as younger guys, and Jack Mosley, who was Shane's father, had brought the video from, I guess Shane's mom had saved all the videos. They got the video out. Jack brought the video to the press room a couple of days before the fight, and we all gathered and watched them, for several minutes spar with each other. Nothing earth shaking. It was basically them just jabbing, getting work in, but it was cool to see that kind of like a hush come over the room. You can never get boxing writers to shut the fuck up, but we were quiet while we all watched that. And then the next, night or 2 nights later, whenever we had seen that, they went out there in front of an absolutely star-studded crowd. I've said this many times. The number of movie stars and TV stars and political figures and sports stars.
Give me one that was nearby. Give me one that was nearby.
I sat like maybe 6-8 feet from Pamela Anderson. I met, going back to my seat, I met Mel Gibson, who called me mate. So there was tons of superstars there. It was ridiculous. It was amazing. I mean, I was sitting next to an AP reporter named Beth Harris, who the two of us were looking around. She was keeping, we were like, see one star and say it to the other person. She was keeping a written list on like a notepad of all the famous folks that we saw. And this is like my first, like I said, my first mega fight. So even though I covered other fights, I'd never really seen that kind of star power. I'm not a starstruck kind of guy, but it was still pretty cool and pretty impressive. And then most importantly, Shane Mosley and Oscar De La Hoya went out there and put on a fucking great fight, an all-timer. To me, still all these years later, is one of my all-time favorite fights I have covered or witnessed in person. They battled it tooth and nail. These guys were young in their primes; they were in their 20s, and they wanted to win for the bragging rights of LA. Obviously, the welterweight championship is on the line, and it was spectacular. The 12th round will go down as one of the all-time great rounds you'll ever see. Both guys, I think, knew this was on the table. Larry Merchant with the great, or Jim Lampley, I should say, with the great call. As they're just teeing off in the 12th round, they're both going for the knockout in a classic pitched battle. I can still hear that call in my mind 1,000 times, and they were just winging it. Oscar De La Hoya got caught with a shot, and I swear to God, I can remember it as vivid as anything ever in any time I've ever been ringside. His neck swiveled, and he looked right into media center, and I swear to God, I caught him. I caught his eye as he. I mean, he won't remember that, but he caught my eye as he got nailed with that shot. I will never forget that. It was kind of eerie in a way. In the end, Shane won a well-deserved split decision. I thought it was very clear that he was the winner. It had been very competitive, but Shane pretty much dominated the last few rounds of the fight to pull it out. He's the guy that made the adjustments. He's the guy that was beating Oscar to the punch late in that fight. He won legit. It was 115, 113 on two scorecards that were split, and then 116 to 112 that Sugar Shane won. Spectacular fight, and obviously they had a rematch a few years later. Didn't live up to it, but that first fight was a truly special fight. And if you never watched it, by all means, go find it on YouTube. Phenomenal fight.
And your first time out in and around and among all the Hollywood stars, it delivered. It delivered in the ring that night for Sugar Shane Mosley, who delivered against the Golden Boy, Oscar De La Hoya.